So for quadratics, there are three objectives. One is graphing and its characteristics, so we're going to do a couple of those. The second is solving by factoring, and the third is quadratic regression. So if you have your computers out, you don't need them because you won't be using Desmos. So you go ahead and close them.
Will this be on paper?
This has to be on paper. Number 4 is where we're going to start off. For these, you need to start off with your axis of symmetry. Well, actually, where you start is not really important because some of this you could do out of order. But we are going to start with axis of symmetry. You do need to remember your how to find that. X equals negative b over 2a. You will need to know that. It will not be given to you. So for using that for this equation, this would be x equals negative, our b is also negative, all over 2 times our a value, which is 1. What would this simplify to? Just 4. Our axis of symmetry would be x equals 4.
Wait, what's that? Is that a word?
Yeah, yes. Then we need to write this next part as if we were going to do it algebraically, but we're not going to actually do it algebraically. You could if you want to. But I just need to put 4 in for all of my x's as if I were doing this algebraically. Which you are more than welcome to do. But we're going to do it in the calculator.
Why was -1?
I think that was right. So in this, I'm going to go into my calculator. I'm going to put in that equation. And I need one of these. So in y equals, I'm going to put in x squared minus. That's not x squared. Yeah, I know. X squared. Minus 8x plus 50. And then I'm going to go into my table, second graph, and I'm going to look for when x is 4. My y value is -1. So I'm going to take that, write that down for my vertex, and write that in my table. Okay, 1 will be my vertex. That's going to be this point with the box around it. I can fill out my x values or look at my table and fill out my x values, either or. But going backwards, this would be 3, 2, 1. Forwards would be 5, 6, 7. And then on our table, we're going to fill those out from the values they give you from the table. So 8, 3, 0, 0, 3, 8. Really, once you have 3 of them, the others will repeat. And then you're going to plot all of those points on your graph.
The values of all 3 numbers is 1.
Something like this. Domain is all real numbers. It will always be all real numbers, so that will never change. So if you want to put that down first, because you remember that's going to be the same, you could do that. Does not matter for the test how you write it in interval notation or segmental notation. But I'll write both. No. You just have to choose. Which part?
I think I need to do it.
For range, what would our range be?
Y greater than or equal to
Why is there a negative?
This would, in interval notation, start at -1 and go to infinity with a bracket because it's included. Or your set builder notation would be y is greater than or equal to -1. Remember that your zeros are your x-intercepts. Where does it cross your x-axis? Where would that be? Where would those be? Write them as ordered pairs, so 3, 0, and 5, 0. So you should be able to find each of these characteristics and graph it. Do we have any questions on number 4 before we continue? This is one objective. So for this, you should have ordered pairs. When you do the second objective, those are going to be in curly brackets, listing them.
We're going to be using that formula throughout this whole year.
Formula, which formula you're talking about? For this objective.
For this objective.
Correct. We're going to do number 6. 6 is similar. We still have to do our x equals -b over 2a. So in this case, what is our b value? -2. A. This is c.
It's what? X squared.
-0 is 0. There isn't a b term, so you have to put 0. Over 2 times our -2, but that doesn't matter because it's just going to be 0.
Is there no B term?
There is no b term, correct?
So B is like the middle one, right?
Yes.
So what's the B?
So there's a and a c. If I were to put 0 in for my x, what would my y be?
-3.
So this will be the point 0, -3 for our vortex.
What?
Or what?
So for 6, you had x equals 0 over, yeah, but when you wrote y equals,
This is your x value. We're putting it into x. We're given our x value 0. We're putting it in for x. Okay. Okay. Did that answer your question? Okay. We can do a couple things without graphing this in order. Domain, we know it's going to be the same. Is this going to face up or down based on this number? Down. So if this is facing down, that means it's going to start our range. It's going to start at -1 and end at some point. Our vertex is going to help us find that point. So if it's going to start at negative infinity and our vertex tells us whether that's a minimum or a maximum, the highest or lowest point, here this is going to be our highest point, so it's not going to go past negative 3. And we can see that on the graph here in a second. So sometimes you don't need the graph to find this stuff, but sometimes it's easier with the graph. Put this into your y equals and start finding your values of your table. I'm going to fill in my x values. So we have backwards, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. Forwards, 1, 2, 3. Some of these points will not fit on the graph, and that's okay. Put the points that will fit. I think the graph goes to negative 10, so we want to put to negative 11. But 0, negative 3, negative 5, A doesn't apply. But yes, there are no zeros, none. Do we have any questions on 6? No.
Where is it?
Your x-intercepts. Where does it cross the x-axis?
I understand. What is that?
Good. For the second objective, we are solving by factoring. So what we were just doing with factoring, but taking it a step further and actually solving. So we're going to start with number 8. With this problem, we first have to get everything on the same side. When we solve these quadratics, it should be set equal to 0. So to get this to be set equal to 0, I'm going to move x squared over here and 2x over here.
Wait, what? Make it 0?
So then our new equation would be x squared plus x minus 72 equals 0.
We don't not put 0, we just put
No, put it equal 0. Everything from the left to the right and combine like terms. Now we have to remember our factoring rules. How would we factor this? Not x squared would be 1. But instead of doing that, we could, because this is just 1, for 2 numbers that multiply to be negative 72, and add to be 1.
Is it 1?
It is 1.
So 1 is 72.
We're trying to find 2 numbers that multiply to be negative 72 and add to 1. Those 2 numbers aren't the actual numbers. What 2 numbers will work?
2 and 7.
9 and negative 8. So because this is a trinomial, your basic trinomial where 8 equals 1, you can go straight into your factors. X minus plus 9, sorry. And x minus 8 equals 0. Then you're going to set both factors equal to 0 and solve. If you have small factors like this, you could go straight into what your answers are, because if I solve this, this would be minus 9 plus 8. So x equals negative 9 and 8. Whatever these are is going to be the opposite. So if it says plus 9, your answer will be negative 9. If it says minus 8, your answer will be 8. And then you're going to put these in curly brackets, your answers. Least to greatest.
I have a question. So for when you did the when you're trying to find what adds to one, yeah. Where did you get the 1 from?
You're looking for two numbers that multiply to be this term, but add to be this term. So the one in the middle. Do we have other questions on 8? Say that one more time. Not an ordered pair, it's a set of numbers. Remember that when you do this, you should only have 2, 1, or none. No answers. So if you have more than 2, something's wrong. You could have, you're supposed to have 2 and only have 1, and then something would also be wrong. You just have to double check your work. Other questions on 8? On the back, let's see more now. Same thing, we need to move everything to the same side. So we could subtract 3x. Now this does not have like terms on this side, so when we move it, we're just moving it. We're not combining it with anything. So our new equation would be 3x squared minus 30x plus 75 equals 0. Say that one more time. Yes, this does have a GCF of 3. So we could divide that out. If we divide 3 out of everything, what would be left? Divided everything by 3.
Wait.
Because we can.
Oh, yeah.
And then we're looking for what? Say that again. Both need to be negative. And then we could rewrite 3 times x minus 5 times x minus 5 equals 0. Or if you want to rewrite it as 3 times x minus 5 squared. Then we're going to set the factor equal to 0. But if I set 3 equal to 0, there's nothing to solve, and 3 doesn't equal 0. So we can ignore that. And just set this inside, x minus 5 equal to 0. We would not need to do this twice since they're the same. We would do the same thing twice. What would our solution be? X equals this 5. Now, with these, I think I started to say this, but didn't finish this. You don't need to show this work. You can, but you don't need to. You do need to show that you set it equal to 0, though. So, we can't set that equal to 0 because it wouldn't give us anything. So if I did this, it's not a true statement. So we just ignore it.
Is that n?
If it had a variable next to it, then you would set it equal and solve.
I understand.
Number 10. Will that be finish this? Number 10. We would do the same thing we were doing before. Move everything to the left. When we move the 2, it doesn't have like terms, so we would just be moving it to the other side. So we would have 10x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. How would we factor this one? I heard different things. Multiply what? 10 and negative 2. So negative 20, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to be negative 20 and add to be negative 1, which would be 5 and 4, but the 5 would be negative. But with this case, because we multiplied, we're not going to go straight into our factors. We need to rewrite into 4 terms. So this would be 10x squared minus 5x plus 4x minus 2.
Oh, there's a spoon in my.
Split the middle of the first two. What do they have in common? 5x. So if we divide that out, what's left? 2x minus 1. What do the last two have in common? Divide that out, what's left? 2x. And then you would rewrite as your factors 5x plus 2 and 2x minus 1. Set both factors equal to 0 and solve. These ones you would need to actually solve because you're going to get fractions. Leave them as fractions.
When did we learn this?
Or me as well.
So long ago.
Solve.
I'm so sorry.
From this, solve both of these. So you'll get two fractions for this one. Sometimes you'll just get one and a whole number. It depends if they can be simplified or not. So your solutions for this one would be negative 2/5 and 1/2. Yes. So in your calculator, we did this before, but just so you see it again. Go into apps, next to math, next to program, and then find, I have way too many. PLYSNL2 apps, and then this one, and hit enter. And then this screen should pop up, hit enter again. And you're looking for the polynomial root finder, the first one. So you're going to go into number 1 or hit enter, and you'll get a screen that looks like this. A lot of this should be the same, so you shouldn't need to change this, but if it's not on this, change it. So the order should be 2, because we're dealing with quadratics that are degree of 2. Real, leave them as fractions, normal, float, degree. And then hit next, which should be graph. And then you're going to put in the coefficients of your quadratic.
I'm lost.
Where?
I'm stuck on the thing where it's the poly root quadratic and then commit it, but now I can't.
Next.
Alright? You want them
Hit graph. Oh. So our coefficients were 10, -1, and -2. And then you're going to solve, which is also graph. And it does give you the answer.
Do you have to show your
Yes. So you can definitely use this to check yourself. I would not use this to just find the answers because you have to show work. it's solved, which is graph. Okay. If you have a graph, and I actually meant to show this with the first objective. Do I have something in here?
I have a group here.
If I have something in here, I could also just look at the graph and see what my zeros are. Again, you would still need to show your work on factoring, so this would only help you check yourself. This one does not have any zeros, but if I did, I'm going to change this a bit. So let's say I actually had zeros, but I don't know what those are. I could either use the whatever app, or I could use my calculator, second trace, and find zeros. But you would have to do this twice. So let's say I'm trying to find this one first. I need something to the left of this, so I can just put it in any number I want. That's to the left. And then some number to the right of this, but that doesn't go past this, so I can say like 0. And then hit enter again, and it'll tell me what that 0 is. Almost never happens. Yes, leave them as fractions. Number 9. How would we factor this?
Wait, what?
I'm sorry. It has a 9 in it. Number 11. How would we factor that?
Divide by 9.
9 and x. So the GCF here is 9x. We divide that out. What's left? There is nothing else we can do to either of these. So at this point, we could set both factors equal to 0 and solve. So for solving both of these you don't have to show your work, you go straight into your solutions, which would be what and what? 0 and 4. You can show the work for those two, but it's not necessary.
9x. Wait, is that a 4 or a 2? Okay, so is that a 9 if you have the x minus 4? Is that a 4?
9.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Other questions on 11?
Can I feel this?
I mean, this is already made. I don't know.
Oh, like, can I do the whole test? Can you scroll?
I doubt that. I don't know the answer to that. I can look though.
So theoretically, 13 should be like 11.
What?
That's like a question.
No.
And you already can solve that.
For number 14, how would we start that? Start 5 to the other side. We have 25x squared minus 4 equals 0.
Divide -4.
You get fractions, we don't want that. How could we factor this?
1.
We can factor this, just not using GCF. What's the other way we can factor 2 terms? Difference of squares. Difference of squares. So 5x minus 2, and 5x plus 2.
what is happening.
What gives you 25? What times what gives you x squared? What times what gives you 4? With this, you do not need to solve both because you'll get the same answer, just one is positive, one is negative. So if you just want to solve one of them, that's fine. If you want to solve both, that's fine too. So I'm just going to set them both equal to 0, but I'm only going to solve one. Yes.
Stop.
Okay, so our two answers would be positive 2/5 and negative 2/5. So you can write them as negative 2/5 over and 2/5 not over. Or plus minus 2/5. Either or.
Is that part of the same question?
Yes.
Plus
Plus minus. So you can write it this way or this way.
So plus and minus is just like the sign. It's just saying that it's the opposite of.
They both look the same.
It's the same, but both positive and
Are you
negative.
doing okay with this?
Other questions on this one before we move on to 16?
Well, if this, we need to solve it, it's already been solved.
Solve it how?
Here, putting everything in.
Yeah, it still needs to be set equal to 0. So you would need to either subtract 24, distribute combined like terms, and then solve it from there, or distribute combined like terms and then subtract 24. That order does not matter. I'm going to distribute first. Yes. Let's go. So x times x will give us x squared, x times 3 will give us 3x. Negative 7 times x would be negative 7x, and negative 7 times 3 would be positive negative 21. Then we could subtract 24 and combine the terms. So x squared minus 4x minus what? 21 minus 44. Negative 21 minus 24.
I'll tell you all the story later. 45, I did not
Trying to figure out what negative 45 has.
Multiple has to be negative 45, has to be negative 4. What two numbers would work?
9, negative 5.
Negative 9 and positive 5. So our factors would be x minus 9, x plus 5 equals 0. Set them both equal to 0. And so it's only 9.
So basically, all you're doing is like so making the equation equal to 0 and then solving it from there.
We're factoring and I'm solving.
But yes.
Okay. What would our two solutions be? Negative 5 and 9, yes.
I guess you gotta figure out. It's a hard part of trying to figure out what type of like how you're supposed to solve it. That's just like that's what it's
Other questions on this one?
Finish that video you're watching.
Next page, go to number 26.
There's no last.
This is the last objective, and then there's a couple other questions I just want to show you, and then, yes. So this one is your quadratic regression or curve of best fit. You will have the pink sheet, but the pink sheet only has the line of best fit. The steps are basically the same, except it's quadratic regression, not linear.
Wait, we're gonna have this on our test?
Oh, pink sheet is what I said? Oh. Quadratic regression is, linear is not.
So we're gonna have quadratic thing. Yeah.
Yes. So for number 26, they give us a table. We're going to put that table into our calculator. So go into stat, edit. If you have things in your list, you're going to go up to the top, hit clear, not delete, and then scroll right down. And do the same thing for L2.
So like, how do you get out of this?
If you're still in the poly whatever, if you go to something else, the main screen should pop up and you should be able to hit quit.
I hit second click and second click.
So I'm not 100% sure what it actually is.
Put in your numbers for L1, L2. I don't know what you do. There's a quit option. What are we in next? Stat edit. This is asking us to use an equation to model the data and find the height after 10 seconds. So that means we need to write our equation, whatever that is, even though it's not asking for that, and then find our answer. So we're going to go into stat, scroll over to calculate, go down or hit number 5. Stat, go over to calculate, hit number 5. And then we want to store this. So go down to store regression equation, hit alpha trace, hit enter on one of those. Then you can either hit enter twice or go down to calculate and hit enter again. Store regression, go down to that, hit alpha trace and hit enter 3 times. So this would be our equation. We're going to write this down. Y equals negative 16x squared plus 200x plus 30. For this next part, you need to write this as if you were going to do it algebraically, but you don't need to actually do it algebraically. You need to put 10 in for all of your x's. Oh! Hold on. It says after 10 seconds. And then there are a couple different ways you could go about finding this answer. 1, you can store 10 as x. So I'm not, you go into a different screen. I'm just going to type in 10. Hit my STO above on and hit x and enter. 10, STO, x, enter. Is this part on the sheet?
No.
you another way that you may not need this specific
Great.
Yes. Okay. So after this, you're going to go into alpha trace, grab wherever you stored your equation. I put mine in y1 and hit enter again, and that would give you your answer.
How'd you get that error?
STO. So our height would be 403 feet. And then I'm going to show you another way you could do this with a calculator. The other way you could do this is if you go into your graph, you should have stored this already. You won't be able to see this on here, but you could change that by going into zoom and scrolling up or down to zoom fit. Then you should be able to see it. I don't think this next part will work if you don't do this.
Zoom in, zoom out.
It's like 0, the number for zoom fit.
On the test read, like, the word columns,
This is just the other way you could do it. So if the store method works, or if you want to do it algebraically, you can do either of those. The other way you could do this is after you find your graph, you're going to go into second trace. And we're looking for a specific y value at a specific x value. So we're going to go into value, number 1. And you want your x value to be 10. And hit enter. And so it'll tell you what your y value is. So you can do it any of those ways. Doing it algebraically, storing it, or this way. They should all give you the same answer. Be careful if you're doing it algebraically though.
You will get the same answer if you just multiply it out, right?
Doing it algebraically. Oh, yeah. Other questions on that one?
So the answer is y equals
Feet.
Do you do number 21, area of couple?
On the next page, go to number 2. This one kind of helps you with like objective 2. So if you had something like this where you have to identify the factors, look for your x-intercepts or your zeros. -3 and 2. Then to write them as factored form or in factored form, we need to write them as opposites. Instead of -3, it would be x plus 3. Instead of 2, it would be x minus 2. You could double check that by multiplying it out. X minus 2. Questions on that one?
Oh, it's the opposite.
So think about when we were solving by factoring, we got to the end and we would switch them, same thing.
Yes.
On the next
I
page,
choked on air.
number 10.
You good? Yes, I choked. Your eyes on fire. I choked.
For number 10. The roots, -5 and 2. How would you write that in factored form?
That's 10. One is very faint.
So if we were to multiply this out, the 5 and the -2 would give us -10.
be positive.
That means it can't be C or D. And it would be +3 also. You could multiply that out to actually find those numbers.
Goodness gracious. good? Yes.
When you get your factors, you could also be thinking backwards. I needed to find two numbers that multiply to get something. If I multiply these two numbers together, I get -10. If I were to add these two numbers together, I would get 3. You could do that without distributing also.
I got the same answer, but I actually combined maybe 2 and 5.
That's fine. I just didn't write that. Two more. On the next page. Number 4. Of the ones given, which ones can we eliminate? C and D, because those are linear. So it has to be A or B. We're given 2 and -4, but what would the solutions be? -2 and +4. So if you were looking for +2 and -4, that would throw it off and you would have the wrong answer. So be careful with that.
Like this on the test.
I do not know the answer to that. I don't remember any of the questions on the test, honestly.
So wait, what? So we're supposed to be looking for the opposite?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to do one more quadratic regression on the last page. This bonus question is strictly if you want to try it. There will not be one left out on the test. Yes.
I did this one, I tried it. I got answer B, but I don't know if I did it correctly.
Not this one.
Yes.
So in your calculator, go ahead and put that data in. Say it again.
What is number 17?
On the test, there needs to be word problems for the quadratic regression.
That edit.
Wait, how do I clear it?
Go up all the way.
And hit clear and not delete. Go to the stats or on edit.
Wait, I think I pressed the wrong thing.
That is on edit.
Okay, how did, wait, it's not letting me clear it.
We're gonna go to the stat. Okay. After you have in all of your data, go back into stat, scroll over to calculate, and go down to number 5 and hit 5. Store this one again. I'll put trace, and then calculate. So -16x squared plus 35x plus 1,451 would be our equation. We would write that down, even though that's not what it's asking for.
So adding is the one press now.
Go back into stat to calculate number 5.
Shit, what?
It says CLC. CALC.
Yeah, quadratic regression. Okay, and then press enter.
Yes.
And then
So I'm gonna do the other method, where I'm looking at the graph, but if you wanna use the store method or do it algebraically, that's fine. So I went into graph, I'm gonna zoom bit, so zoom 0. The rainbow one on there, but yes. And then second trace value, we're looking for when x is 7. So 9, 12 would be our answer. Graph this, zoom 0 to make it fit. Second trace, go into value, put in 7 and hit enter.
oh wait, how do you go back?
Back to, you can show me word for questions like this. So you would need to show your equation and you would need to show that you put 7 in for x.
That's it, I think. That's it's just
Okay, I got the bare minimum. I still can't say algebra.
Are there any questions we skipped over that we want to go back and see or do? If not the bonus question, I'll let you guys do that on your own. Vita.
So when I solved it, I didn't do a calculation. I just put in regularly, and then I got the second.
That's fine. You could do that one. Yep. Jenna.
21, but I just have a question about it. The interest would be x, right? So
No, that's gonna equal 42.
But how do we get 912? I know like we got equation. Oh,
Second trace value, put x in for 7. Put 7 in for x.
I didn't get that.
Savannah.
What am I going to order my first time?
As soon as we finish everyone's questions, yep.
Can you do that with anyone?
I'll start it.
Okay.
oh, 20 is
On the same page.
yeah, it's
Because I think
yeah.
okay. So for this, I don't know which page this is. I want to say the third one.
Second one.
Second one. If you got a problem like this, where they're saying the area, I don't know why it says below. It just is 42. We need to find the value of x. They gave us our length and width. So we have x minus 3, x plus 8 equals 42. This would be just like the problem where it was equal to 24. So we need to distribute and then move 42 over.
So the squared is nothing, right? I thought like interest squared would mean x and then squared.
It was talking about the entire problem. It's going to be squared. So like at the end, because you're multiplying x times x, you get a squared. That's why I said that.
Okay, I thought it was like
Okay. Other questions? Like the second one. Get back to the second one, I think.
Wait.
So not the front page of the actual second page, but the first. Individually.
Wait, once you go on the graph thing, like when you have the rainbow, how do you get like the answer?
Second calc, go into value. Other questions you want to go over? Go through.
Is that the answer or?
No, it's not. I just set it up.
For that one, after you combine, right?
combine. Set equal to 0 and then factor.
I totally follow you every time.
Other questions?
Wait, so would the answer be x plus 8 and x minus 6?
For this one?
Yeah.
Remember, you need to have actual answers. You need to actually solve it.
Oh.
So for the remainder of class, you have a couple different options. Focus on this, practice whatever questions you feel like you need and whichever objective you feel like you need. Finish your tests if you need to do that. Or work on other practice related things.
Did you grade the test already?
Yeah.
Yes.